Oh, let me tell you something. Busting makes me feel good.
Welcome to Blockbusting, the podcast where we love to hate the movies. I'm your host, Jay Light. Joining me today, my guest, Saurabh Kikani.
Hello, hello.
Hello. Nice to have you down here in the studio to talk about this movie that you hate.
I hate this movie, and here's the little wrinkle for our conversation, Jay, is that I hate and I love this movie.
I mean, okay. And for those of you who are not psychic or maybe don't read episode titles, Saurabh hates Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. The second movie in the Indiana Jones franchise, a 1984 American action-adventure film directed by Steven Spielberg, prequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark, featuring Harrison Ford reprising his role as the North character. Basic plot: after arriving in North India, Indiana Jones is asked by desperate villagers to find a mystical stone and rescue their children from a thuggy cult practicing child slavery, black magic, and ritual human sacrifice in honor of the goddess Kali. So, why do you hate this movie?
All right. Well, you tell me, Jay, where should we start? Should we start with the things that I love about the movie first and then get into the hate? Nope, just go straight to the hate.
The one thing that you mentioned to me when you were running through movies that you could talk about was that you hated the racism in this movie.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I think that seems like a prime place to get started.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you a little anecdote from my childhood.
Hit me with it.
I went to I am not Jewish, but I went to a Jewish elementary school. And the teachers at this school were all kind of like post-60s hippie idealists. It was a very diverse school for the most part. And there was a day, it was in the summer, and our teacher happens to randomly bring up Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and says to this classroom full of impressionable young elementary school students, well, that stuff that they eat in the movie, the stuff that they eat being chilled monkey brains, snake surprise, which is a giant python or anaconda snake that you cut open
and got more little snakes inside.
Yes. She said, well, that's what they actually eat.
With the soup with the eyeballs in it of indeterminate origin.
Yes, they could be human, they could be anything. And we don't know where they might be from the Indian slave children that are beneath the palace of this place where it takes place. This teacher says, oh, that's what they eat in India, with a total straight face. And I'm a young person, and India has got a lot of different regions with different kinds of cuisine, and I was like, I don't know, maybe. Like, we've never had that. And then every kid in the class just stares at me. And for the rest of my entire tenure at Emmanuel Elementary School, everyone just kept asking, so you got snake surprise today in your lunchbox?
Boy.
But people actually believe this shit. So, okay. Where do we begin with the racism in this movie?
Well, let's begin. Are you an Indian man?
Yes.
So just for clarification,
yeah.
And not to add another layer of racism from these elementary school kids who are like assuming that you're assuming that you're eating snake surprise when you're Pakistani or something like that, and that's not even what you're. Yeah.
No. I am 100% Indian, born in the U.S., but my entire family is from India, and I was the only Indian kid in San Bernardino, California. Well, maybe not in the entire city, but in the schools that I went to, I was pretty much the only Indian kid when I was growing up.
Gotcha.
And Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom has haunted me pretty much my entire life as I was growing up. Everywhere I would go, the only sort of lens through which people seemed to be able to see me was either starving slave child that has to be rescued, a person who loves really bizarre foods before it was popular, or a leader of a devilish cult that rips the hearts out of people, and while still beating, the heart catches on fire.
Yep.
Every single Indian character in this movie, and there are a lot of Indian characters in this movie.
Yeah, because the movie takes place in India.
It is. It does. Every single Indian character is some awful stereotype. And this pains me because I love Indiana Jones. Raiders of the Lost Ark and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade are among my favorite movies ever. And Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, it okay, let's see. Where do we begin? We have the slave children who are starving, who need the Indiana Jones / white savior to come in and rescue them from their plight. We have the starving villagers who are kind of humble and like offer food but can't do shit for themselves, unless this person randomly happens to drop into their village, who can now save their entire population. We have the devilish cult leader who, as I said before, rips hearts out of people's chests.
While they're alive, no less.
Alive.
Very powerful. No, unbreaking the skin. What kind of demon wizardry is going on here?
It's something that we all learn as little kids in India, but few of us actually get to the level where we can like attain that mastery. But apparently they found the guy. And then on top of that, we have the sort of like feckless, like British people who are the Indian people who sort of bow down before like the British overlords and want to be just like them. And then
also for the British thing, there's also the part where they're having that meal of food that would apparently in no way be served in an actual Indian palace or even an Indian like 7-Eleven. But they have this guy who's like the prime minister working for the Maharaja who's like, oh yeah, and he's just taking shots at the British guy the whole time. All under his breath, but all like so overt, like, yeah, you fucking suck, man. You guys are the worst. You ruined our country.
Yeah, and then we find out that he's a double agent. He's working for the cult. He's working for the thuggy cult this whole time.
Yep.
So even the Indians who are trying to start an independence movement at this early stage, I think it's set in the year 1930-something, which is at least a decade before.
I think it's 35, if memory serves.
Yeah, so...
Yep, 1935.
12 years before India gets its independence. The movie also is inadvertently saying that even these freedom fighters really can't entirely be trusted to run shit themselves. By the time we get to the very end of the movie, when Indiana Jones has more or less defeated the cult leader, spoiler alert, everybody who hasn't seen it yet.
It's fine. We're going to spoil the shit out of this movie throughout the whole way.
It's a spoiled movie just in general. So it
came out in the 8. If you haven't seen Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom by now and you're getting mad at us for spoiling the movie, then you are, oh God, just stop listening to the podcast.
You should.
This is not for you.
Yeah.
I don't know how you've made it 40 some odd episodes in and we've spoiled every movie that we've talked about and you're still like, well, I haven't seen the movie. I don't want to know what's going on with the heart. I don't know what's happening with the cult.
I want to imagine, Jay, that there is a loyal subscriber to this podcast who has not seen a single one of the movies that you guys have blockbusted on here.
Maybe. Who knows?
But yeah, by the time we get to the end of that movie, there's a cavalry of British troops that then lay waste to the remaining thug figures, and all the Indian people are saved once again by Indiana Jones and British colonialism. It's the most bullshit movie I think I've ever seen in my entire life. Even Indiana Jones's loyal sidekick, who's a very fun character, is this weird like Chinese stereotype. Like
Short Round.
And look, I love Short Round, but no one actually wants to be Short Round.
I think that the one problem that I had with Short Round is that he's not a fat Chinese kid. If you're going to call somebody Short Round, make sure he's round, he's scrappy, he's skinny.
Yeah. And see, even that, I mean, whatever. I'm going to get stupid with the stereotypes.
Short Round is real streetwise. Indiana Jones wanted to fuck Willie in the same room as Short Round. He was filing that away for the spank bank later.
That's right. You know what? The 80s were a weird time for everybody.
The 80s were an extremely weird time. They were definitely not the most woke time by any stretch of the word. I think that and I can totally understand, this movie as far as the whole grouping of the Indiana Jones franchise, a very weak entry.
It is absolutely...
Just from top to bottom.
I mean, look, 4 years prior or 3 years prior, Raiders of the Lost Ark comes out, changes the game.
Mm-hmm.
Changes the game. It's a masterpiece of action filmmaking. Spielberg just showing another incredible trick from his bag of tricks of what he is able to do. He's a wonderkind, right?
Right.
And then he starts going through a divorce around the time of the making of this movie. And I feel like he started channeling every dark impulse he had. And for whatever reason, he's like, I'm going to blame Indian people for all of my fucking problems. And I'm going to put this into a movie. And this is going to be my like exorcism of every dark thing I feel.
I did not know that Steven Spielberg was going through a divorce when he made this.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it changes it, right?
Really, hold on. E.T. came out in what, 82?
82.
So E.T. is basically like the last hopeful movie that Steven Spielberg ever made, and then he gets divorced, and I was like, fuck it.
Yeah.
I'm going full bore. We're going Asian stereotypes. We're going Indian stereotypes. We're making the love interest the worst character of all time.
Oh my God! Especially look again, Raiders of the Lost Ark. We have Marion, Ravenwood, right?
God, so great.
So great.
A great foil for Indy. A character which is I think kind of pretty rare to see, especially in that era of filmmaking, especially in like action adventure filmmaking, to have a female character with her own agency.
Completely.
It's very, very unique, and she is like I said, a great foil for Indy, a great romantic interest, a great character in her own right. And then you go back to having this awful Willie Scott.
It's
a singer who's like sort of okay with being kind of like a weird showgirl, possibly sex slave in Shanghai for an Asian drug runner or something, some kind of organized crime dude. And all of a sudden she and the whole time she does nothing but complain.
That's right. She does nothing but complain, and she is part of the reason why Indiana Jones almost gets killed a million times, not because she is some smart, capable, daring person who's found herself in some trouble through no fault of her own. It's because literally every time she's like, ew, that's too icky, or oh my God, that's disgusting, or oh, look at that shiny thing. That might be a jewel of some kind. Let me go towards that.
I don't want to step on the bugs.
Yeah.
Oh, gross. Bugs.
And ironically, Spielberg ends up marrying her after they were done shooting this movie.
Really?
Yeah, Kate Capshaw. That's his wife now.
Steven Spielberg, what are you doing, man?
It was just a really, really low point all around. And what sucks about it is that, look, I get what he's doing. He's doing like a riff on those old school Gunga Din like type movies, and that's totally fine. That's in the wheelhouse of like great adventure filmmaking. Mm-hmm. But Gunga Din was made in whatever year it was made, 1940 something.
Yeah.
This is a 1984 film. I know Spielberg he's met Indian people. They're in his movie. And he's just like, nah, we're going to essentially make these Indian people do a version of brownface, even though they're brown. You know? It's a lot of like step and fetch it, like type stuff that's happening in this movie. And it sucks because I love Indiana Jones so much. So I cannot help but still love aspects of this movie, which makes me hate it even more.
Right. That's the thing. This movie is, I think, a movie, kind of honestly watching it, because I had never seen it until you mentioned that you wanted to talk about it, so I watched it a couple days ago. It reminds me a lot of sort of late stage Spielberg, like where we're at now, where he's making movies like Ready Player One and The Post, where he's kind of, he's still obviously a great director, and even a bad Spielberg movie is still a pretty decent movie.
Sure.
But this is just fine.
Yeah.
It's like, it's at best a 3-star movie. There's some really cool sequences. Obviously you got the heart getting ripped out. That's a really iconic scene.
Sure.
The falling out of the airplane on the life raft.
Sure.
It makes no sense at all. There's no way that would pan out, but it's great. It's really entertaining.
Like set piece wise, this is one of the best Indiana Jones movies, right?
Yeah.
Like the minecart sequence.
Minecart sequence, yes. The fight on the bridge. Perfect. Beautiful scene.
All of it is so, and look, in Harrison Ford's performance in this movie, he's committed. He does interesting things. Like in some ways, this was Spielberg doing Evil Dead 2 before Evil Dead 2. It's this weird action, horror, comedy, thriller mix of everything. And yet the racism is so thick, and it's just so baked into the DNA of this thing. It's not even like the occasional thing, like you'll watch, say, like the Lethal Weapon movie. Like Lethal Weapon 2, one of the opening lines in that movie is Riggs, played by Mel Gibson, talking about like, oh, the Japanese are buying up everything. And it's almost cute. It's like this like late 80s cutesy throwaway line.
Right.
But this, it's just beginning to end. Every single character, every single plot plot point, every single element of this is just caked in this fucking racist, just nonsense.
What do you think is the turning point in filmmaking about the time when, like, I guess maybe not in action filmmaking, because the whole view of a villain is usually you got to get someone who's a crazy stereotype, right?
Right.
And stereotypes are huge in action filmmaking, especially in adventure filmmaking. Where do you think the turning point starts to be where people start to be like, oh, that's kind of really racist? I don't know if that's necessarily the greatest way for this movie to go.
You know what? So I have this vague memory, and I might be totally wrong about this, but I remember when the movie True Lies came out with Arnold Schwarzenegger, directed by James Cameron, that there was actually a little bit of an uproar about the way they portrayed the Persian terrorists, right? That were the foil in that movie, and I remember that being the first time that I could remember where this was like 1990 something, where there was kind of a mini uproar about it, and James Cameron even tried to address it. And he even said something to the extent of, well, look, it's just what I kind of picked. He's like, it could have been Irish terrorists, it could have been kind of anybody, but I wanted to be a globe-trotting type adventure in the vein of James Bond, and so that's why I picked these guys just for geographic purposes. And I remember thinking, whoa, wait a minute, that's actually something we're talking about now? Like, that's kind of happening. Whereas with this, like during this time, like, look, it's 1984, Ronald Reagan, it's morning in America. We're kind of feeling a little xenophobic. We don't even like other white people. You know, we don't like the Russians. There are many echoes, actually, to where we are right now.
Honestly, I felt especially watching this, I'm like, this seems like a kind of movie that could get made now, and it would be made almost exactly the same way. The special effects would be a little bit more hyped up, and the set pieces would obviously be bigger and more bombastic, and there'd be a lot more like dumb jump cuts. God, I mean, watching this movie really made me miss the way big set pieces were done, where it's just like you get a couple takes, you don't have to keep jumping around and using shaky cam and doing that Bourne style bullshit.
Yeah.
You just get some really nice, beautiful shots, and you get to see some stuff. And who cares if there's a little green screen in there? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You get to see a plane explode in the background of a shot while they're riding a life raft down a mountain.
See, again, Jay, a reason why I have to hate this movie, because it's so good in so many other ways. Like the Douglas Slocum, who was the DP on the first 3 Indiana Jones movies, he shoots this movie, even though it's a silly, like, you know, little adventure yarn, as if he's shooting Lawrence of Arabia. You know what I mean? He's trying to make this good, and he succeeds, and that's why it sucks even more, because it's like too insidious.
It's so interesting now that you really bring up this pact of like Steven Spielberg being divorced during this time and going through it. And I'm looking on the Wikipedia here now. So let's see. Willard Huyck, who's one of the screenwriters on the film. So obviously people know George Lucas is one of the producers of Indiana Jones, and he helped co-create the franchise. So this is from the Wikipedia page. Huyck later recalled, at one point we were writing it, we told George, you know, we know a lot of Indians. We've been there. I don't think they're going to think this is really so cool. Do you think we're going to have trouble shooting there? And then George Lucas was like, are you kidding? It's me and Steve. We're going to be just fine. And then months later, then they called and they're like, oh, we can't shoot in India. They're really upset. I don't know. I just thought maybe we could pull it off. I thought we could get rid of all this stuff and maybe, change up some stuff and make it seem like human sacrifices are a thing and add in elements of other religions and other stuff that makes no sense at all. But, the Indians are real sensitive.
That was, by the way, a fantastic George Lucas impression. And I am now imagining in my head, Jay, that it was around this time that Lucas first started thinking up Jar Jar Binks. Like, it was just a bunch of bad ideas all happening at once, and it was just, the resting on the laurels of past success, and then it led to, because of Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom, we had the prequels. All right, that's what happened.
I can just imagine George Lucas, like, sitting with Steven Spielberg, like, Spielberg's drunk off his ass, like, mourning the loss of his marriage, and he's just like, come on, Steve, you gotta go out. You gotta just go with me. We're gonna go get some pussy. We're gonna go hit the cantina, and we're gonna be just fine.
You're the beard, Steve. You're the beard. Come on.
Steve, you made E.T., and some girl's gonna want to see that finger light up inside her puss. that's just what it's there for.
We're going to show her a close encounter of the Steve kind. Come on. Let's do it.
Boom.
Boom.
There you go. You're gonna need a bigger dick, Steve.
Well played, sir. Well played.
So the thing about this movie, again, the racist stuff is very prevalent, and as a white guy, I'm like, okay, cool, yeah, the white
Right.
people saved everything. That doesn't surprise me at all. But it's really just like, it's so stark because it's there from beginning to end.
Yeah.
And the characters in this movie are compared to the other Indiana Jones movies in particular, not necessarily Crystal Skull. I think Crystal Skull at least had maybe some more fleshed out characters besides Shia LaBeouf just being Shia LaBeouf and yelling all the time the
Sure.
way he does. But you at least had Marion come back in that,
Yeah.
and in Last Crusade you have all these great characters. You get Indy's dad, and you have these great villains show up. And same thing with Raiders of the Lost Ark. You got Marion, you get Salah, you got all these great villains, and the villains are Nazis too, which is so much fun.
Yeah.
And this is like, there's parts of it that are fun, but it feels not it's not like it doesn't hold up.
Right.
But it feels, yeah, it's kind of that like insidious kind of fun where it's like something seems very off about what's going on in this movie.
Yeah, well, it's this kind of thing where I feel, especially because of the time in which it was made, right? And I don't say that as a cop out, but because of the time in which it was made, it was almost an innocent racism. Like, you can tell, like, they aren't actively trying to say, like, we want to make a movie that's anti-Indian people.
Right.
It's just that the racism was so baked into the DNA of the fabric of the culture at the time that they didn't even think that there was anything wrong with any of this.
And that's the thing. And that's the thing about this movie. It doesn't feel malicious,
Right.
But it does feel very short-sighted.
Yes. Look, let's make a quick comparison to the MacGuffins, right, of Raiders and Last Crusade. All right, so Raiders, it's the Ark of the Covenant, right? And it is treated with a certain amount of reverence and awe and respect. And Holy Grail, it's the Holy Grail. And same thing. I mean, there's a whole issue of Indiana Jones almost finding his faith in order to pass those tests to get the Holy Grail. Now, in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, these references that they make to Shankara stones, to goddess Kali, to the Thuggee cult, these are all actually real things, but they are treated just as a thing to just kind of add horror elements to, or just completely twisted to mean something completely the opposite of what it actually is.
Right.
Like, Kali is a real goddess in Hindu mythology. The Shankara stones, you can see them all over India. Like, they are these like little stones with 3 lines drawn on them. And the way they're treated is just as a prop with no respect. Now, as someone who's not religious at all, it doesn't bother me as much, but nonetheless, I can completely understand why the Indian government got a hold of that script and was like, nope, we're not going to do this.
Yeah, we don't want any part of this.
Yeah.
I get it. Man, is there anything that you think could have been changed to make this movie not as run-of-the-mill and middle-of-the-road as it is?
Yeah, so I think there's 2 things specifically. A, just get rid of Willie Scott, or at least give her an arc, right?
Oof.
Give her a journey of some kind,
Yeah, I thought she was at least like midway through the script, midway through when she and Indy have that sort of sexual tension battle, and I'm like, oh, maybe she's actually going to step up, and then no, she doesn't, and she just is still an abomination of a character to watch the whole time, and so excruciating.
Yeah, shrill. Just this shrill.
That's the word I was looking
Yeah,
for. Thank you so much.
Damsel in distress, and the worst kind. So get someone who doesn't have to be Marion Ravenwood, but just someone who's at least as interesting, even if she's not as cool, even if she's not as whatever. Give her an arc. Let her be something more interesting, because she shares a ton of screen time with Indiana Jones. Secondly, even if it's only just one Indian character that isn't pure evil or pure idiot or pure completely useless person that needs Indiana Jones to save him or her. Just one. If they would have done any of those 2 things, I think I could have put this up there, not with Raiders or even Last Crusade, because I think both those movies are far superior.
For sure.
It would have been, like a not too distant third. a movie that I could appreciate for being a roller coaster ride with excellent set pieces, with Spielberg type mastery of cinematic technique. But instead, all I have to do now is watch it and think about how fucking racist it is. And also, just a little side thing that happened because of this movie, it ruined Street Fighter 2 for me. It ruined the video game.
What?
Street Fighter 2 was ruined for me because, look, every character in Street Fighter 2 comes from some far-flung part of the world.
Right.
And almost every character in Street Fighter 2, which was my favorite video game growing up, is kind of like a cool version of a stereotype. Like Guile is the American GI. He throws sonic booms and does flash kicks, right?
Right.
Even E Honda, right? Like there is sumo culture in Japan, and dude's got a six-pack and he's kind of badass, right?
Right.
Ken, Ryu, I could go down the whole list. What the fuck is Dalsum? What the fuck is Dalsum? I've never...
He's stretchy.
He's stretchy. He wears a skull necklace.
Aren't Indian people stretchy, though?
Wait, well, I'm about to grab your neck right now across this table, Jay. I actually lived in Japan when I was 14 for like a summer, right?
Right.
And I lived in a town that I know for sure, like they had never seen an Indian person. Their only frame of reference was fucking Dalsum from Street Fighter 2. And of course, every time I'd play the game, everyone would just kind of look at me like, come on, why are you picking Ryu? You know who you really want to be.
Oh, my God.
And if you've never seen much of India or know anything about India, and like even the level that Dalsum plays in, there's like an actual picture of like a Hindu god in the background and an elephant. And like it's just the most stereotypical possible thing you could do. And it's only because I know Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Man, you know what I think would have made this movie better is if they had somehow made it a plot point at the very end where you find out the British are also involved in this cult, and they're the ones doing the manipulation.
See? That would have made it. You should have been alive to help write that screenplay at that time.
I wasn't even close to alive. This is 84. I wouldn't even be conceived for another 5 years.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was
So
just
I'm
about to ask you.
behind the curve. I'm sorry.
Well, you know, it's all it's in the realm of Hindu Indian tropes. You might have been reincarnated right after this movie came out.
You know what? Maybe you're right. I'm going to put a lot of blame on Steven Spielberg's ex-wife for this.
Yeah.
And this is entirely your fault, and I don't know who you are, but you have basically caused a man, and then Kate Capshaw too. You guys have both caused Steven Spielberg to just phone it in over and over and over and over and over again over the past several decades.
Yeah.
And how dare you?
How dare you? You know what? We'll always have Jaws. We'll always have Jaws.
I've never seen Jaws.
You've never seen Jaws, Jay?
Yeah, it's in my cinematic blind spot, man.
You're a film major, right?
Yes.
Oh man! All right, we got to watch Jaws together. We're gonna do a Jaws screening together.
I'm not gonna watch Jaws. I've heard somebody say that it doesn't, that I might not like it as much now. They said it doesn't hold up that well.
I haven't seen Jaws in at least a decade, so entirely possible. But I think whoever said that too is wrong.
I hope so.
I hope so too.
I want to find out for myself.
Yeah.
So Rob, we obviously have both pretty similar opinions on Temple of Doom. Is there a movie that you would recommend that people watch instead? Obviously, the Raiders of the Lost Ark and Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade. If you haven't seen either of those are both fantastic movies. The high points of the franchise of Indiana Jones, some of the high points of Steven Spielberg's filmmaking career in general as well.
Absolutely. So, okay, this is going to be a bit of a weird recommendation because it's not necessarily the like rollicking adventure movie that Temple of Doom could have been had the racism not been there. But kind of a new movie, The Lost City of Z by James Gray.
Yep, that came out last year, right? With Charlie Hunnam?
That's right. And so the character that Charlie Hunnam plays is a real guy. Based on a real guy. He was an explorer in the sort of like World War I era, and he actually did go try to find a place called the Lost City of Z. The Indiana Jones character actually is heavily based on this guy.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and I think the movie does a fantastic job of presenting a, granted, very fictionalized version of who that guy was, who was an explorer, an adventurer, a guy who could see that people who are not white are not necessarily like the degenerates of the earth that he either has to save or kill or run away from. And I think it's you'll have your adventure box checked if you watch this movie. You'll have your cool drama box checked if you watch this movie. You'll have your, hey, I don't like racism box checked if you watch this movie. And at the same time, it's a multifaceted kind of portrait, like a true old school adventure movie. So I'd recommend that one.
Great. Well, everybody should go check out Lost City of Z. I know that is available, just like the Indiana Jones franchises, on Amazon because it's an Amazon co-production. So go check that out. So Rob, thanks so much for coming on today, man.
Thanks for having me, man. This was a blast.
Where can my listeners find you on the internet?
So you can go to saurabhkikani.com. That's SAURABHKIKANI.com, or on Twitter at SKIKANI.
Awesome. You can find me at Diet J on Twitter and Instagram, jlightcomedy.com for show dates. And man, don't go watch Temple of Doom. I mean, go watch it if you want to be disappointed in one of your favorite filmmakers, but it is what it is. Guys, this has been Blockbusting. Go see something good for a change.